The meeting back to order. Thank you, Minister, very much. We have the departmental staff here to answer some questions from the committee, and we're going to start with Mr. Martel for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If someone could answer, I'm not sure who to put this question to. Is everything working as it should? The Minister said that Canada is not a dumping ground for aluminium. I'm talking about aluminium. She said Canada wasn't a dumping ground and that the three countries work together. I have some difficulty with that when I see Mexico not properly controlling its aluminium imports. I don't see the three countries really cooperating, because the upshot is that Mexico, which is not controlling imports as they should, are at present creating a situation that's unfair. So I'd like to hear you on that.
Thank you very much for the question. I can assure you that Canada works very closely with the United States and with Mexico across the full range of trade issues, including in critical sectors, such as the aluminium sector. I have not heard any concerns expressed with respect to the transshipment of Mexican aluminium into the Canadian market, which seemed to be a situation that was implied by your question. And so if I've misunderstood, then perhaps you could reframe it. But if the concern is with the nature of Mexican aluminium imports from the world, there are a multitude of fora, committees, working groups, and opportunities that are created by the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement for the three parties to have constructive discussions about that. But as far as I am aware, no concerns have been raised with me or my team regarding the possibility of transshipment of aluminum through Mexico to Canada.
On va rester dans l'aluminium.
Let's stay on aluminium for a few moments. Mr. Fowler, you are, of course, aware of Section 232 of the trade agreement on customs tariffs with the U.S. At present, under President Biden, Article 232 is not being applied, but it exists. If it were applied, it would be very difficult for the industry. And do you have a game plan to deal with it? We've experienced its effects in the past, and it was very difficult for the industry, very tough on them.
Thank you very much for the question, and I fully accept the premise behind it. North American integrated market for trade in products like steel and aluminum is critical to the prosperity of Canada and to the well-being of the aluminum sector in Canada. The United States is not in a position to fully satisfy its own domestic market needs when it comes to aluminum. They rely on imports of aluminum products and significantly rely on Canadian producers to provide inputs into manufacturing. I've had no suggestion that the United States is reconsidering an imposition of 232 tariffs on Canadian aluminium, and we work very closely with the Canadian sector. It works very closely with its counterparts in the United States and Mexico, and we, of course, work with the United States to ensure that if there were any issues that arose that caused concern for the United States as a trading partner, that we would move proactively to address those, recognizing the importance of the situation.
Oui. Alors, juste pour...
I'll go to softwood lumber for a minute. There is a flagrant lack of leadership. I have a company in my riding that's going to be closing down. It'll close down for at least a month because of tariffs on softwood lumber exports to the U.S. 180 employees will be laid off. There are significant delays in groups formed for dispute settlement purposes. Why is that?
Situation with respect to the treatment afforded to Canadian softwood lumber exports to the United States is unacceptable, that the tariffs that have been imposed by the United States are unwarranted, and that the tariff rates that have been arrived at by the methodologies deployed by the United States are inaccurate and will not be sustained when subjected to a legal challenge. Canada has a very aggressive litigation strategy with respect to softwood lumber. We've made good progress with respect to advancing that strategy in recent months. We have seen new panel formations under the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Agreement to consider different U.S. determinations with respect to softwood lumber, and we will prosecute this to a satisfactory resolution.
Monsieur Fowler, moi j'aimerais savoir, parce qu'il y a des délais constants dans la formation.
Mr. Fowler, it takes a very long time to form task forces for dispute settlements. I'd like to know why it takes so long.
The time that it has taken to establish panels to hear different softwood cases is extremely frustrating to the Government of Canada. We have been pushing counterparts in the United States to move more quickly with panel formation. It is a process. It does take a certain amount of time. And in recent months, as I indicated to the previous question, we have seen an improvement in the pace at which these panels are being formulated. And we have had 2 new panels formulated since the beginning of the year.
Okay, thank you very much. On to Mr. Sheehan for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't know who to direct the question to. I don't know if it's Mary Catherine, but I just wanted to ask a question. You know, we're studying the 2026 CUSMA review. And, you know, I've been on the Trade Committee for a while and, you know, witnessed the process that we had undertaken. And I was proud that Canada had, you know, tried to put it like a gender lens on it, an Indigenous lens, union lens, by engaging with various groups. Will the review be taking into, other than this fine study that we're going to present some information, but you have a couple of years till 2026, you know, are there plans to go back and engage and to take the pulse and to see if what their expectations were in the CUSMA deal, having been engaged, what it looks like now in 2026? To you, Mary.
Thank you for your question. So indeed, we have a fairly robust consultations methodology that we use when we are reviewing our trade agreements, and it is our full intention at looking ahead, as you note, to 2026 to proceed with with broad and comprehensive consultations with Canadians, including a special focus on some groups that have been traditionally underrepresented in trade and whom we have sought to really advance in the CUSMA. We have a specific SME chapter which is designed to encourage and support the participation, for example, of small and medium-sized enterprises and foster their engagement in international trade under CUSMA. And as you note, we do have gender provisions, we have Indigenous provisions, and we will be making extra effort to ensure that stakeholders and rights holders are engaged and informing our views as we prepare for the review.
Thank you for that answer. I'll be sharing my time with Francis Druin as well today. How much time do I have left, just so that Francis knows?
4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Okay. Merci. Merci beaucoup.
I thank my colleague Forceau Saint-Marie, with whom I'm fortunate to be able to cooperate on questions regarding steel. A question for you on that. When there are allegations of dumping, what recourse do our Canadian companies have? Can they turn to the CIIT? Can they go to the courts? Can they work through these tribunals to make sure that there is no steel dumping in Canada?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and that is exactly right, that the Canadian industry has recourse to redressive measures to deal with situations of unfair trade practices, whether those are situations of dumping on the part of foreign companies into the Canadian marketplace or situations where heavily subsidized goods are entering Canada at a rate that affects the competitiveness of Canadian products in the Canadian marketplace. Those companies and industries in Canada have a right to petition the CIIT to impose measures at the border that would offset the margin of dumping or the margin of the subsidy and its impact on Canada.
Merci beaucoup. Puis je vais mettre mon chapeau.
Thank you. I'll put on my farmer's hat for a moment. My colleague, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, talked about how important supply management was in Canada. We are also aware that the U.S. is very protectionist for some foods, particularly those subject to supply management. So the whole issue and the way that we engage in the relationship with the United States, sometimes agricultural groups in the U.S. sometimes forget that beef may come from Alberta, but it's fed in the U.S. and then comes back to Canada. I think your teams in 2016 had provided us with a hamburger showing full well how integrated our agricultural economies were across the border. Do we still engage in these conversations with the U.S. to make sure that we keep this alive? I'm proud of our economy, I'm proud of our farmers, but sometimes we do have to remind our neighbours to the south of what we really do. Do we do that through our embassies and through our teams on the ground?
Thank you very much for the question. We do absolutely have, as was described, a very integrated economy in the agriculture space with the United States. I know that this committee has already heard from a number of witnesses to that effect, and including the fact that some products move across the border. Many times the import on one side is the input to export on the other. Some products in agriculture may add value more than once and cross the border several times. And that integration is very valuable. It's very well known in the agriculture space. And we do work very hard with our committees and our interactions with industry to make sure that we have all the best and the latest examples to bring to bear. And we work very closely. I'm with the Department of Agriculture, but with colleagues in Global Affairs and our diplomatic presence across the United States at the embassy and in the consulates, but with businesses and with provinces and territories to make that message clear.
Okay, thank you very much. Monsieur Blanchet-Jonquin, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I applaud my colleague, the member for Glengarry Prescott-Russell, who highlighted the Bloc's defense of supply management. I like the hamburger, but let's come back to what we were talking about. Mr. Fowler and other members here today, I and other members here today, are concerned about forced labor that is prohibited under the agreement, and yet a question on the order paper by my honourable colleague shows that no goods have been seized in Canada. Goods produced by forced labor should not be imported. We have billions. The U.S. has billions in seized goods, especially from the Xinjiang region. What mechanisms is Canada putting in place to comply with this import prohibition?
Je dirais que c'est une question.
That question would better be put to border services. You could ask them about their methods and the legislation governing their actions. I can say that we are not as well equipped as the U.S. We don't have the same authorities to intervene and to seize goods that might be produced through such means. What would you need, Mr. Stewart, to be better equipped? Money, people, structure, leadership, a new legislation. And we are working on that as we speak. This is serious. Organizations have stated that Canada was a gateway for forced labor goods, including solar panels. Have you heard such allegations? And if yes, what actions have you taken to make sure that this does not keep happening?
Si je comprends bien la question,
If I have correctly understood the question, we are trying to be clear with Canadian businesses. We talk to them about goods that are at risk of having been produced by forced labor. In the March 2023 budgets, the government said that by 2024 it would introduce a bill designed to limit forced labor in Canadian supply chains and strengthen prohibitions of goods produced by forced labor. After the last session, the committee adopted a motion in the same vein and wrote to the minister to remind her of her commitment to this government. It's now June 2024. Where is that at?
c'est un travail qui
That work is now underway. What's your deadline? I could not answer that question because it is up to the government. Could you give us a written reply and detailed plan? Because people would like to know. I could very likely provide you with more detail on this. Transparency is important, and confidence in our institutions are all under threat of foreign interference. In the fall of 2024, you said it was too early to put forward proposals for the review of CUSMA. And in the fall of 2023, you also said the review had not really been defined. There had been very preliminary discussions between, or among ministers rather. Colin Robertson, Vice President of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute and former trade negotiator, said that even if Canada didn't know what was going to happen in 2026, it should get ready now by setting up a task force. Do you still believe that it isn't already the time to put forward strategies and priorities? Have these been established?
Merci pour la question. Je dirais que c'est
Thank you for the question. I would say it's still too early to put forward or present future Canadian proposals that will be put on the table at the 2026 review. The work is certainly underway. We are continuing to assess implementation of the agreement, ensuring that it works as intended by the parties. But speaking in public, I would not disclose the proposals that Canada will put forward. The priority for Canada is to ensure that market actions in Canada and the U.S. continue. We needn't wait for 2026 to tackle any problems that might come up in the agreement and in its implementation and operations. We're working very closely with our North American partners and also very closely with Canadian industry to set up proposals where necessary. Mr. Fowler, why is it too early? Why would...
We've got 14 seconds remaining.
Oui, je simplement savoir.
I just want to know, why is it too early? Why does one person say it's not too early and you say it is? Why would someone else not agree with you or vice versa? I don't want to speak for Mr. Robertson. I'm giving my own opinion based on my current position as negotiator for the Government of Canada.
Fowler, Mr. Cannings is next, but it looks like we've lost connections or else he's left. So I'm going to go on to Mr. Kimek.
Oh, ça va, j'aimerais le prendre si ça te va. Je te remercie. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't expecting to go this early,
Sorry.
but since Mr. Canning is off, it gives me an opportunity to move a motion that was put on notice by my colleague, Mr. Seaback, on Tuesday, June 11, 2024. I'll just read into the record. Maybe Mr. Canning will make it before we have to vote. That given the large workload the committee has on the docket, the committee instructs the chair to book 5 meetings between July 8th and September 13th to deal with unfinished business, and pressing matters facing Canadians, such as the impact of the government's cap and trade system and EV plant fabrication using offshore steel, and other pressing matters as they emerge. I won't prolong the debate too much, but I'm even offering myself to come here after Stampede if you need me to substitute for one of our members on this side, because I would be interested to talk about especially EV plant fabrication using offshore steel. I have fabricators in my riding who would be affected. They were working on the TMX pipeline for many years, and they all were at risk of losing their jobs when Kinder Morgan gave up on the pipeline, when this government decided to basically expropriate through regulation, make it really difficult to build it. I'll mention that there's a report by the PBO that says that the 3 companies who've received federal government monies are going to receive in total $43.6 billion from the taxpayer. And I really wonder how much of that will be going to Canadians to build those plants and to ensure that Canadian taxpayer dollars go to them. So that would be worthy of study over the summer to understand how many of those jobs are affected by it. And there's also all the government's different environmental regulations that have trade impact. I was also surprised to note that when the minister was here, that there was a claim that somehow national security is not connected to trade, but they're integral. They're very much the USTR, the trade representative, for the past however many years, whenever you go onto the White House website, they link the two closely together. Section 232 tariffs feature very prominently in Robert Lighthizer book, and the entire conversation in that entire book for USMCA negotiations is strictly about national security needs of the United States government and their wishes. So I just found it completely baffling why the minister didn't understand that connection, and if we're going to have to renegotiate the deal by 2026, this has really deep implications. The minister doesn't even understand that fact, to understand who may be on the other side of the negotiating table, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, it really doesn't matter. They've kind of converged on the matter of China policy. And I'll say, as the vice chair of the committee, the Canada People's Republic of China Committee, we look at national security and trade issues that affect it. So I think it's worthy that the committee should return over the summer, meet in person, and continue its good work that it's done so far. Thank you, Chair.
Much. Question to the committee. We have our very smart departmental staff here for, should we wait and deal with this at 5:15 so that some additional questions can be asked? Or do we let the witnesses go and we deal with this motion?
As long the witnesses are here, and as long as we have the agreement of my colleagues that will continue this on after they.
Can we leave the motion till 5:15 so that we can get a few more questions answered from the officials? That's agreed. Okay, we'll deal with the motion at 5:15. Sorry, Mr. Cannings. I guess you've had your time now, so now I will go back to Mr. Cannings.
Madame la Présidente.
Yes, sir.
Oui, point d'information.
Madam Chair, I will also have a motion. Would you like me to wait for later?
So that, we have a couple of people who would like to get some questions of our witnesses. Mr. Cannings, the floor is yours for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and my apologies for that computer glitch. I had to reboot everything. But thank you to the witnesses for being here. And I'm just going to go back to some of my earlier questions of the minister and perhaps get a little more detail, a little different perspective. And the first one, obviously, is about the investor-state dispute mechanism that we've managed to remove from the Canada-US part of this trade deal. We've just finished this study on the Canada-Ecuador free trade negotiations that are going on, and Canada seems to be, I would say, taking a pretty hardline stance on ISDS there, despite Ecuador's clear intention of not allowing that. ISDS seems to be going out of favor in many parts of the world in terms of free trade agreements. We have side letters between Australia and New Zealand and the UK when it comes to CPTPP, taking that out. We see the EU changing their views on ISDS. I'm just wondering what Canada's policy on ISDS is, because we seem to be celebrating it being removed from CUSMA and yet pushing it hard in new trade agreements. So I'm just wondering if someone could perhaps fill me in on where we are with investor-state dispute mechanisms that many Canadians think are very, very deleterious to Canadians and Canadian sovereignty, really.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. And I think it is an important question because the government tries to take a nuanced view of investor-state dispute settlement in the context of our trade agreements. It's obvious that clear and balanced rules and an effective dispute settlement mechanism are key to creating a predictable investment climate for Canadian investors abroad. We try to take an approach that balances investor protection with the country's right to regulate in the public interest. In so doing, we look at the domestic legal regime of the country. We assess whether Canadian investors in that country would be able to rely upon the domestic legal regime to swiftly and effectively deal with any issues that might arise in that context. And then we make a determination of whether it feels appropriate in the context of a particular negotiation to seek additional disciplines that Canadian investors may have recourse to. I don't want to speak specifically to any ongoing negotiation, so I won't say what Canada's discussing with Ecuador, but we are certainly aware of the issues that that the member asked in his earlier question of the minister with respect to the Supreme Court ruling in Ecuador, and all of that very much informs Canada's position at the negotiating table. Thank you.
So just to be clear, to use the CPTPP as an example, the UK trying to gain accession to that agreement, Australia and New Zealand signed side letters with the UK removing ISDS from those bilateral agreements within that agreement, and yet Canada didn't. Does that mean Canada doesn't trust the UK's legal system?
Thank you for the question. No, that is not how I would characterize the basis for the decision that was taken with respect to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom was acceding to an existing agreement. The rules of that agreement were already in place. Those rules included access and recourse to an investor-state dispute settlement mechanism. And at the time of its accession, and in our negotiations with them, at no point did the United Kingdom approach Canada about suspending the application of ISDS between us. And so consequently, the basis upon which the UK acceded was the rules that had been previously negotiated in that agreement, and that included ISDS. It wasn't a judgment specific to the United Kingdom.
Well, I was just curious why Australia and New Zealand took a different approach. But I'll move on to, again, a question I asked the minister about some of the parts of the labor chapter, the environment chapter, with rapid response mechanism. Just wondering if you might comment on how you think those chapters have worked. Are they doing what they're supposed to do, and can they be strengthened?
Thank you very much for the question. Our view is that the rapid response labor mechanism is working very well. It is working exactly as intended. It has provided a mechanism and a platform for the parties to work together to address specific issues that are brought to our attention, often by labor organizations in one of the three countries. This mechanism has provided a means by which to consider the labor situation in a variety of specific facilities in Mexico. And our view is that in the vast majority of cases, resolutions reached through the RRLM mechanism are key to strengthening union democracy and to promoting labor rights in Mexico. I think our view is that there is every possibility, and we are quite confident that we will continue to collaborate effectively with Mexico in this space and with respect to labor issues more broadly. If there is an opportunity to further strengthen the mechanism down the road, then that is a conversation that Canada would be pleased to take part in.
Thank you very much. Next on my list, I have Mr. Sidhu. There is 3.5 minutes left.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Deputy Stewart. Could you share with the committee on how Global Affairs collaborates and works with other federal government departments like agriculture when it comes to trade negotiations? In terms of, let's say, agriculture has an issue. Do you pull in agriculture, the new agriculture office that opened up in Manila, Philippines? How did that come to be? How's that going?
In the normal course, the department, as is often the case, the lead negotiator in a trade negotiation works very closely with other government departments that have interests in the matter, including in particular the Agriculture Department, but there are others as well. And for that purpose, there are a variety of committees and fora in which that collaboration occurs. Indeed, when trade negotiations occur, groups of officials from the various parts of the government go and participate. But in the ongoing administration of agreements, that is also a shared responsibility. Chairs of committees will depend on, under the CUSMA or the CPTPP or CIIT will depend on, what the subject of the committee is and where the chair is best placed. The trade office in the Philippines is actually a separate issue. It was a result of the Indo-Pacific strategy that was launched 18 months ago and is part of the broader effort to deepen our trade relationship in the region and to deal with agriculture issues that may arise.
Thank you. Madam Chair, how much time do I have left?
1.5 minutes.
Okay. Part of our government's approach is to expand trade and our trade footprint. Minister Ng was recently in Arizona and Texas to open a new trade office in the region in the Grand Canyon state. Could you share more details about this announcement and how this office will support further support Canadian interest in the region?
Happily, I was with the minister in Phoenix, where we announced the opening of the office. It is, according to people who live there, the fourth largest urban area in the United States now. A vast number of companies headquartered in the region. We reallocated resources that we had currently deployed elsewhere in California to Phoenix to deepen our ability to cover trade relationships in that area. We think, because we aren't really in the business of constantly making sure that the allocation of our trade commissioner's service is yielding the maximum benefit.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for taking the time today.
All right. Okay. Let me thank the witnesses very much for coming again to spend some time with the Trade Committee. You are excused to go on and complete the rest of your day. We are going to deal with a couple of motions that we have. So we have Mr. Kimmick moved a motion that everybody is aware of. I have Mr. Duran down to speak. Did you still wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then Mr. Baldinelli.
So I'm not a regular member on this committee, but I'm seeing a pattern develop over other committees where I've been requesting 5 meetings, and I've heard it verbally, but I think it's probably July 8th until to September 13th, probably.
Yes, yes.
So I can tell that none of them wrote the motion. It came from upstairs, from the leader's office, and I salute the effort, but I know what what they're up to. I've been around this place for a long time. They're trying to say the Liberals or whomever is not going to support this motion. We don't want to work this summer. And I respect the other side can do whatever they want. We've talked about national security. They've mentioned national security, how it's important. I will recall to this committee that the leader of the official opposition still hasn't gotten briefed. I salute Elizabeth May. I salute Jagmeet Singh. They've done their job. But back to but it is back to the motion. It's a nice play. It just doesn't have the effect they think it will have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his comments. But last I looked, it was the gentleman right back there that wrote this motion for us. And it's in regards to a situation that we think is critical for us to examine during the summer period. I mean, it doesn't have to be 5 meetings. We're amenable to discussing that. But I mean, we're looking at a system that will limit emissions in Canada's oil and gas sector. Right? I mean, it's a situation that for Western Canada, I mean, the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers said in a media statement that adding emissions cap regulations to existing carbon pricing and methane policies creates a layer of complexity that could hamper investments in clean energy products. CAP also said that the unintended consequences of the framework could result in significant curtailments, making this draft framework effectively a cap on production. I mean, there's reports out there now that this could be a $600 billion hit to Canada's economy. So this is a major situation that's developing, and as rightly so, we thought it was something that we would want to bring forward for consideration by this committee during the summer period, because I know our agenda is quite full, to be quite honest, and this is something that we could examine during periods of the summer. Again, it doesn't have to be 5. We're open to discussing that, but my hope is that my colleagues will give this fair consideration, and let's vote on it and see where we stand.
Thank you very much. Everybody is fully aware of what the motion says, and of course it would be exciting to be back here in July and see you all again. I think we'd be really excited to do that. So we will ask for a recorded vote. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Fisher.
Do we have, just
no,
hold on, do we have all the members still with us? Yes, thank you.
Mr. Fisher?
Voting no. Thank you.
Monsieur Drouin?
No.
Ms. Atwin?
Opposed.
Mr. Sidhu?
Opposed?
Mr. Sheehan? Mr. Baldinelli?
For.
Mr. Helland?
Yes.
Monsieur Martel?
Yes.
Mr. Kmitch?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca?
No.
Mr. Cannings?
No.
Is pour 4, 4, nays contre 7.
Terribly disappointed. Would you like to speak to your motion very quickly, sir?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Soumis par mon collègue Simon-Pierre Savard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was submitted by my colleague, the Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte, Simon-Pierre Savard-Tremblay. Should I read it?
In front of them, is there any discussion on the motion?
Sur les boutiques hors taxe.
Oh, sorry.
It's about duty-free shops.
I'm not getting translation.
It is about duty-free shops. This is the English Channel.
Cannings?
This is the English Channel. This is the English Channel. This is the English Channel. This is the English Channel.
Mr. Cannings?
This is the English Channel.
Speak French and
Oui, Madame la Présidente,
Okay,
ça me fait
please, would you
plaisir de
read it
parler
in-
français.
I'd be very pleased to continue speaking French here in Ottawa. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to confirm that colleagues received the motion. Would you like me to read it?
Check your connection, Mr. Cannings, because the others here they're getting it.
it's on English, and it was working fine until now, and now it's not.
Madam Chair, does that mean that Mr. Canning wasn't listening when I spoke a bit earlier? That's interesting.
I'll read out the motion in English, Mr. Cannings. It was the same motion that Mr. Savard-Tremblay gave us on Tuesday, whereas the duty-free shop regulations under the Customs Act clearly state that goods in duty-free stores. Am I saying this too fast for translation?
No, I think it's okay.
Okay. are for immediate export only and must be declared under the Act of Return to Canada, whereas duty-free stores are subject to strict location, inventory, declaration, and storage requirements to ensure that all products sold there are exported for consumption outside Canada. That the committee recommend that the government recognize duty-free as an export industry, that a clear indication of the nature of this industry be conveyed to all federal agency concerned, and that a report back to the House before the end of the current session of Parliament. That's a bit of a problem when you talk about the current session of Parliament. If the current session of Parliament means when it ends next week, it would be very difficult to do much on this motion prior to the end of the session. Is there any discussion? I think if we're going to do something with it, I think you need to change the end of session because we're not going to have time to get it. But the mover of the motion has to amend it.
So we do have a problem with the English interpretation online only.
I mean, is it something that you would support? No, with the current wording now. Yeah, I mean, we'd have to fix that.
So if somebody wants to make a change to this, Mr. Blanchette, if you want to, I realize you're doing it for Severe Tremblay, but I think a report back to the House and end there and eliminate before the end of the current session of Parliament, because that nothing would be done.
Madame la Présidente?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'm confident we can do something here.
Yeah, so if we ended it, report back to the House and take out before the current session of Parliament, it would then leave it open